and events that take place in town. And thank you. I was hoping for this. And tonight we have all three of them in one organization. So I'd like to do a proclamation, and if you'd like, why don't you come up and I'll present the proclamation to you. Or to any of your membership that would care to join.
So we have our board members here and some people from the community. We would love to be able to have them join us if it's okay. So,
When you have meetings, are they appropriately board?
yeah.
Oh, okay. If any of you would like to come down for this proclamation and get your picture made, and we have our cameraman sit at the back there. Why don't you and I get the position where we could move it down a little bit, just a little bit more. And you can probably turn just a little bit. Talk sideways instead of foot full face, but we can get more people in. That's good. It's my great pleasure tonight to give a proclamation from the office of the mayor of the City of Pearland. Whereas mental health is essential to everyone and their health and well-being, and all Americans experience times of difficulty and stress in their lives. We all do. And whereas good mental health helps us face difficult and stressful events in our lives, with one of the four adults experiencing health problems and with one half of chronic illnesses beginning by the age of 14. I'm a little over 14, so I'm working on it. And whereas mental health and illnesses have an adversely effect on one's ability to adapt, and often life-threatening in nature, with preservation as being an effective way to reduce the burden of mental health conditions. And whereas businesses and schools, government agencies, healthcare providers, Christian citizens share the burden of mental health problems, and with early and effective treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives. And whereas businesses, schools, government agencies, healthcare providers, and citizens share the burden of mental health problems, and with early and effective treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full and productive lives. Now, therefore, our time read by the power vested in me as the mayor of the Zion City of Texas, Pearland, Texas, do hereby proclaim the month of May as Mental Health Month in Pearland. And I ask all citizens, both near and far, to join with me as we proclaim the month of May 2018 as Mental Health Awareness Month, to promote public understanding of the importance of mental health and the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, and the need for appropriate and accessible service for all people with mental health conditions. And this is given on my hand and seal of office this 22nd day of April 2019, and with a great deal of pleasure, our son, this is Tom Reed, the mayor of City of Pearland. And I'd like to make my appropriate comments of saying, I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight, because I think it's very appropriate that people know about this. So would you like to, why don't we do this first? Josh? You get them all? They're squeezed in, huh? Okay. Why don't you take that and make a few comments appropriately? Okay, thank you.
Well, I think this proclamation covered every single point of our talking points, because mental health does affect every single one of us. And so we believe in collaborations, and we believe in supporting one another regardless of where you're coming from. So we're very thankful to be here, and we appreciate the council for supporting the work that we're doing across the city of Pearland. Thank you, Mayor.
Now just hold your position, because we've got the impact organization about to document this. She just walked in and we're ready for another photo. Everybody smile. Super. Thank all of you. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate
Appreciate
you
it.
so much.
Thank
Thank
y'all.
you, Marie.
I
We appreciate you.
y'all. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like the council to be a part of. It's the recognition of the public service people. You with him? Yes, I invite some more. Public service. Guess we move down some more here. We have room for some more if you know. Okay. This is a very important proclamation because it speaks to who runs the city, provides the health, safety, and welfare of our community, and have an influence on just about everything that happens in the city of Pearland and other communities of this type. It's a proclamation from the office of the mayor of Pearland, whereas American citizens are served each day by public servants at the federal, state, and county and city level by public employees who take their jobs and their oath quite seriously as they keep our nation and areas of the world of America working efficiently. And whereas many public servants, including military personnel, police officers, fire department, border patrol officers, embassy employees, healthcare professionals, and others who risk their lives each day in the service to the people of the United States and around the world. And whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, and scientists, train conductors, astronauts, nurses, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, and social workers, and countless other occupations that provide the diverse service to serve our nation, our cities, and citizens. And whereas the public servants are to be recognized for the quality of their work that they provide at all levels of service and contribution for our citizens and for our nation that has contributed to our quality of life. Now, therefore, I time read by the power vested in me as the fine city of Pearland, Texas, do hereby proclaim May 5th to 11th, 2019 as Public Service Recognition Week in Pearland. And I ask citizens both near and far to join with me in recognizing the outstanding work and accomplishments and contributions of the City of Pearland employees who work each day to make our place a place people want to live, work, and to play. It was a great deal of pleasure that this was given under my hand, seal of office, this 22nd day of April 2019, and signed it on behalf of our City Council and the employees that have shown here today before you. And I'd like to present this to Michelle and ask you to make a few appropriate comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe this is the third or fourth year that we have celebrated Public Service Recognition Week, and I'm proud to accept the proclamation and be standing before you today as a representative of the City of Pearland employees. There are approximately 750 of us. Some are more obvious than others. Some show up in a big red truck, others in a blue and white one, or blue and white car with lights. But there are many others who are in the back office processing invoices, doing payments, hiring employees, running budgets, doing all the things that oftentimes aren't publicly noticed. And we do so because we are called to serve, and we do so proudly. And so we appreciate this recognition of Public Service Recognition Week for all of us and all that we do. We do plan on having some different activities and recognition for employees during that week. So we
Great.
appreciate your and council's acknowledgement of that too.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's all big smile because we're going to have our picture taken. Oh, you got to piggyback. Good. Thank you, Michelle.
Make sure you charge it for that. Thanks,
Good.
Are you through?
Give it back over. Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Pearland. And as we go through the process here tonight, I appreciate each one of you being here because we are a pretty long agenda, and it's good to see citizens in the audience. Moving to our normal agenda, if you'll please rise, we'll have an invocation tonight, and Councilmember Little will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Lord, we love you, and we know that you love us because you have shown us in so very, very many ways a beautiful sunshiny day, a light breeze, and appropriate water when we need it, and sometimes when we don't. But that's okay. We appreciate that very much. You've told us on many occasions and have guided us throughout our life and our existence as humans as to how to conduct ourselves with others and how we can contribute to the betterment of our citizens and our city. And that when we appreciate that very much. As we go through the process tonight of our agenda, we know that you will be here with us, guide us, and work with us as we address the issues of our community. And as we go through our days and our trips to our homes later, I know that you will be here at the meeting as we go through the process. And as we stop and think about those other individuals that are connected to our city and our nation, we ask that you be with each and every one that is overseas, particularly our military and our civilian population. And may they return soon and well, and may you also look upon us as we go through our future days as individuals and as citizens of this fine city of Pearland. We ask that you not only be with us and watch over us tonight, but you be with us on our trips to our home, for we ask this in your name and for your sake. And amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
The agenda I have was at copies outside on the table before we entered the chamber, and I will be following that procedure and the order in which it appears on that particular agenda. Moving in the agenda to the roll call. All of our city council members are here except for Councilmember Moore, and we are, I think, ready to go to work and get some positive things done for the evening. Moving to new business item number 4, which is citizen comments, and ask Councilmember Rez if he will call upon that issue.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 individuals that have asked to speak out, but they've asked to speak out about a particular business item, new business item number 2. So we'll call them over then.
Okay.
Nobody else has offered or asked for an opportunity to speak, Mayor.
Okay. Moving to item number 5, public hearings. We have none tonight. Move to item number 6, consent agenda. I'll ask on Councilmember Carbone to present for the consent agenda, with the exception of request to pull items H, I, J, and K.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, approval of consent agenda items A through G. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
It was approved. Okay. Moving in our agenda to item number H.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, resolution R 2019-108. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening. This contract is a service contract that we have for the various city facilities, some 30-plus different buildings for essential HVAC and refrigeration preventative maintenance. This contract was actually bid out last year in 18, so this is just a renewal of that. The company has performed, and so we do bring them back to you annually and just seeking your consideration to renew the contract.
Council have any question or comment?
Mayor, I guess one of the reasons why I pulled it is because they had been on, I guess they've been on contract for, this is going on their 15th year?
We bid it in 18, and this, we have one more renewal eligible out of that.
So this is just a renewal,
Yeah.
but they're still not the lowest?
It has various items in there. It's the overall best for the city. That was when you awarded it a year ago. It's mentioned there that we received 7 bids in March of 18. So, I mean, there may be individual items, but we, sum them up and evaluate the bidders and come up with the best recommendation from that. So, and it looks like, just looking at the tab sheet that was included there, that the bottom line on there does show that they're lowest. So,
Okay, I just, I guess kind of in line with one of the changes that we made sometime towards the end of last year, just making sure that, that we're not, and I guess we are making sure that we allow other companies the opportunity to come in and bid, and we're not, awarding flat contracts just because they were the folks that were there prior to. And so, that was pretty much my only thing. I didn't know if anybody else had anything else, though.
Mr. Secretary, would you roll the agenda where we can see citizens can view the items? The H is what we're talking about now. Okay. Oops, disappeared. Okay, sorry. I'm going to proceed with Ms. Councilman Reed.
This is their, just real quick, this is their last renewal, right? Or
there's one more left.
One
There's
more
a
after.
3-year, and so there's one more remaining.
Okay.
That completes your comments.
Yes, Mayor, that completes my.
Agenda, Council.
I got one quick comment. For 23 facilities, this comes out to a little over $9,000 per facility for preventive maintenance. Is that in line with industry standards? It seems a little high for preventive maintenance. Change out filters and.
I don't know about that. I mean, we can get into the detail or send something up. And it wouldn't be nearly as straightforward as just dividing the number of facilities. There's actually, I think, there wasn't a 33, but you can't compare police station square footage there with here versus the library. I mean, there's a wide variety of large and small buildings. I mean,
Okay.
and it was bid out, so I mean, the prices are shown there, what we got in the best prices. So,
All right, thank you.
Just,
Council have any other questions?
yeah, I do have another question. And more, I guess, kind of a comment. Something that Councilmember Little just mentioned about, it's not for all facilities, or it is for 23 facilities, right?
yeah, if you look at page 5 of 10 of the material that's provided there, there's a list of the facilities and the quarterly maintenance and the bid tab sheet for each one of them.
So I don't know how many months ago it was, but we had that company come and offer to, put so many folks on for 6 months, and we were going to pay $500,000. I'm kind of confused as to, we have this contract sitting in place, and thank God we denied that or told them to go back to the drawing board and maybe come back with some more itemized facilities. But we already are paying for this type of work to be done. And I know this is just HVAC, but I mean, that's HVAC is typically one of the more expensive pieces and heavily maintained pieces of our facilities. Correct me if I'm wrong, staff. But I guess I'm kind of wondering why we would even have that group present. And help me out. I don't know if any of y'all remember the group that I'm talking about that came in here and asked.
I remember and read, and it's really apples and pickles. I mean, this is a application of the air conditioning, the quarterly going in and doing the maintenance. That was a recommendation for all the facilities for a long-term evaluation of the equipment. Made it a one-time evaluation. This is an ongoing thing we will have for all facilities. So this is doing the work. The other one was for planning and budgeting, larger pieces, capital improvements, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but and it might be apples and pickles, oranges and pears. I mean, at the end of the day, these folks are going in there looking at our HVAC systems and letting us know whether something needs to be done, right? I mean, we're paying them, $208,000 or $9,000 a facility, or it varies per facility. But at the end of the day, we're paying this company, right, to go in there, to maintain our systems and preventative maintenance. That's what it says, and repairs. And so I'm pretty sure part of that maintenance, preventative maintenance, is making sure that everything is operating properly with respect to the HVAC systems, right?
Very narrow. I mean, they're doing what they're told to do in the scope of this bid. They're not. They may make recommendations when they're going in and looking at that, but that'd be different pricing, and we may have to bid stuff out. This is actually doing that kind of work. So,
is that company coming back anytime soon? Do you know?
More likely, we'll put it together as supplemental for a budget for consideration for next year, just like it was in the budget for this current year, and so we'll look at that at budget time. Probably a smaller package. I think might have shared something out that to look at some of the newer facility or older facilities and the larger facilities. So that's a different path, but we'll probably bring that back in next budget.
Yeah, I'd encourage all of us up here to make sure to remember this, this specific contract and others like it when we're looking at the budget and looking at, again, the possibility of spending, even if it's half, $250,000 on some company to come and just send folks out. And I don't know, it didn't seem like it added up. But thank you.
Question on 1.15 of the natatorium and the rec center. Why is on the Lee Thompson company is at 0 where all the other ones have an amount? It's on page 5.
She's headed that way, so I think she's got an answer for us, I hope.
Good evening. The reason why that's no bid is because there is a separate contract for the Dectron units. So that one is provided at no cost. So that was not actually a cost to us.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Owens.
Yeah, I, looking at this and when we looked over, we're seeing, what is it, out of the budget for this year, it's 100,000, I believe it was. And then for 19 into 20, 108,000. And I guess one of the concerns are, if we're going to do this, could we at least know what we spent to date so far and how these estimates are coming out on there? I know that they're coming out with estimates to go in and do different things and make investigations. But then right behind this one, we got another one coming up for HVAC, basically the same thing for 50,000 with another company to do this. And it seems like that the scope of work is basically the same on this one. So altogether, we're looking at about $250,000, $260,000 altogether. One company to come in and do it, and then another company below, Fort Bend Mechanics, will be coming in and with a $50,000 contract as a backup service for emergencies, I think is the way it's listed. But since we've gone through about 6 months or 5 months into 19, do we have any idea out of the 100,000 what we've spent so far to date?
I don't know if we know off the top of our head. I mean, since we may have to circle back with you and let you know all what we did on that. So.
Yeah, because it's we're showing in the budget right now we got 100,000 or 100,000 in it less whatever's been expended so far on there, and then we going into next year's budget's 108,000 through there with a $8,000 uptick in it. And one of the other things that kind coming in and selecting this firm is one of the things that's captured in there. It says that it done business previously with the City of Pearland, which often, I know they bid the contracts on it, but they've had a contract since 2004? No, 2006. So they actually had this contract for 14 years, and even though it was bid previously too. But on some of these, I'd like to see if we're looking at multi-year type thing to do that. If we could have some information that says, okay, we've been 5-6 months into the budget, we had 100,000 in there, we spent X number of dollars within the 6-month period of time. Something that we can look at and say, okay, we're close to the 100,000, or no, we only spent 20,000 out of the $100,000 budget. Do we need 108 this time?
Any other question or comment? Just a comment on this. I remember last year when the air conditioning went out both in City Hall and also the public safety building. It would have been quite helpful if we'd had this quarterly review and preventative maintenance of that. So I think we'd have all stuck our hands up and say, yeah. Any further comment or question? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving at our agenda to item I, Councilmember Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, Resolution R 2019-107. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're discussing the staff report.
So as was noted in the materials, this is again another renewal of an existing contract for the second year. This contract, just being prudent and making sure we have contractors lined up when we need it, is a backup for those same HVAC maintenance services in case the primary vendor wasn't available for any reason and we didn't want to be caught short and have to go be in a position not having a contract in place. So this is, again, the backup as you did last year.
Okay, does the council have any question or comment on this item?
I just echo the same thing I did a while ago on there, and I noted in there in the write-up that they had been called out on one other project. We're not saying that the Thompson doesn't have the capability for emergency bases, do they?
Not saying we don't have the basis, but again, just in case they run into problems, and we don't want to put all our eggs in the one basket. So we need somebody. It's one or the other. We aren't going to be doubling up, or I guess if somebody had some particular specialty, but it's purely what it says, a backup.
Okay, again, if we could have something on when we do a contract like this to say how much we had in there. I see that, 18 and 19, it was 20,833, and looks like we're doing the same thing on this to get it up to 50,000. So I don't know if we spent all of that money so far, or if we spent part of it so far, or what have you. I guess one of the things that I'm looking at on there is when we come in with these estimates, what are we basing our estimates on? Is it actual incidents where they've had to come out, or if it's something during a process that we know that's going to happen or occur during a period of a year's time?
So Councilmember Owens, if I can answer that question for you. The last item, the estimated amount was $208,000. We spent for the last 12 months $225,000. Likewise, for emergency services, it's based on the estimate of the previous year and what we have budgeted. So we believe those numbers are pretty close to being accurate for what's in there and what we're asking for approval.
Okay, so coming back in on the maintenance side, what do we do? Quarterly maintenance checks, John, or what is that?
Well, the contract does call for quarterly maintenance of the machine. So they go in there, checked fluids, the belts, they run them, they make sure everything's operational. They change the filters depending on the type of filter media that they have, and then they move on. If they see there's something obviously that there's a problem with, they'll let us know, and then we have to pay for that repair. So they're just keeping them up and running and operating properly.
So actually, this contract is really going to be used for something that Thompson can't get out and do or don't have the staff to do, and this is a backup for them to be able to come in and do that.
Yeah, exactly as Mr. Pearson said, it's simply just a backup to our main contract.
Is this pretty well, the contracts like this, is this pretty well the only one that we use where we come in with a backup on it? Are there other contracts that we use that we, for backup?
We have other contracts we use, such as the auto parts suppliers.
Okay.
Any other comments from council? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving to consent agenda item J, Councilmember Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, Resolution R 2019-109. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion second on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a contract for professional design services. We have a contract with HR Green for work that was associated with Hughes Ranch Road. That contract was below the $50,000 amount. We had a need for some additional different engineering services, which we had added to the Green contract, which kicked it over the $50,000. So that's why you're seeing this.
Any further question by council on this item?
Yes, Mayor. I'm just a little concerned, not necessarily with the necessity of the project, but just where we are with the ad service. I feel like maybe I just need to have some questions answered, and I feel more comfortable about the award. But when we provided them the project, did we tell them Did we give them limited scope? Did we tell them open ditch only as an option?
Councilman Perez, yes, the answer was that we had piped in many years ago one side of the ditch, and then with the added flows from Hughes Ranch Road, the intent was try to keep everything on the surface as was possible and just do it through regrading of the ditches that were there, both on the shallow side with the pipe and then on the, I'll say as the east side of Brookney with the existing ditch there, and try and utilize the existing outfall.
Okay.
Try to
And
keep it simple.
not to come off as rude, I gathered that from the write-up, but what I couldn't connect the dot was with the overflow that was coming from the new project that was insufficient for the storm sewer that was done on the west side of the road. Had we told them, look, you need to analyze within the right-of-way an open ditch only as a solution, and that's what they had proposed on the 44,000?
We wanted to keep it with regards to the same confines that it was there right now.
Okay, that connects my dots. I mean, my concern was that wouldn't they have looked at that as an initial possibility in the design when they scoped it? Therefore, inherently incorporating this as part of the design process. But if we limited their scope, we thought that was appropriate, then I don't have a problem with the award.
Okay. Any other question or comments on this? Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving on our consent agenda to item 12, K, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, Resolution R 2019-111. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion.
Thank you, Mayor.
Wait,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You're next in line.
So just to introduce this real quick, this is a contract we're recommending for street sweeping services. It's a program that, as we described pretty thoroughly, we're obligated to do a certain amount, but just good practice, not to keep the streets free of debris and out of the storm system. We do have a in-house street sweeper, but that kind of equipment is notoriously, breaks down. It's just a very intense, hard on the equipment kind of operation, and no matter what, anywhere I've been, those are up and then they're back down for maintenance and service, no matter what kind of maintenance you do. So this recommendation is to go forward. We're not abandoning our own equipment or use of that, but to supplement that and add to that and have an operation with contracted service. And this was done through a bid board. We have using the City of Sugar Land's pricing for working with us for this year as decided here.
Okay, with that information on the record, council have a question or comment on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So I had a couple questions about this one. So it looked like the original cost of the existing sweeper said was 131, and then we paid roughly 170,000 in maintenance costs over, it looks like, an 11-year period. So that was broken down over 11 years. That was roughly $27,000 a year. So I'm assuming we've, over that time period, added miles that needed to be swept. Is that correct? Or is this the same number?
No, I mean, the street inventory has obviously grown that much. A street sweeper, I think Clarence will tell you that, after 7 years, they need, more and more major maintenance. And after 10 years, generally, they're just no longer functional in terms of being able to operate.
So you've got about a 10-year lifespan? Is that what you're
Best case, and the last few, particularly, you're going to have even more major maintenance kinds of things.
Okay, and so if we take this contract then, so I took the price of getting the 2 new ones, plus like a middle of the ground kind of maintenance costs, and took that over the 11-year time span as well. Looked like it would come out to average somewhere around like 59,500, 60,000 a year. So it's not too far off, but what were the labor costs that are involved in this? Like, people obviously have to operate these.
You mean our own internal staff to operate? Yeah. Well, Clarence can talk to that.
Councilmember Hernandez, I don't have that off the top of my head. That was not calculated. This was strictly maintenance cost. I would like to note, however, that this 69,000 a year roughly, this is for 2 sweepers doing what's needed. That cost earlier that you mentioned, that would come down, basically that would be for one sweeper.
No, the number that I gave you, the second number, was for the 2. That was the 485.30 plus the maintenance cost.
Okay, my apologies.
Sure.
No, our labor costs were not included in here. That is a whole nother category. This was strictly, we laid out for you what we've been spending on parts, maintenance, and then purchasing costs versus contract costs.
Well, okay, and then also, will the existing sweeper be sold if can be sold? That is a possibility?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if we determine we can't get any more life out of this thing, which is where I believe we are, then it would go to auction.
Okay, so then if you can't give me a number, do we have staff that's dedicated to operating the existing sweeper, or would there be staff that would be dedicated if we moved and purchased two new sweepers to operate those, or?
I will let Andrea answer that question because she's been dealing with this a lot longer than me.
Good evening once again. The current staff that's been operating that street sweeper from the time that it was in a different division would be repurposed to the hotshot crew. So right now, when that equipment is down, that person is sent to the hotshot crew to supplement those activities. However, if the contract is in place, then that person can actually address the chopping trees that fall on the street, removing that with another piece of equipment that we have. So we would not, at this time, be able to say that we would reduce by a staff member. We would simply make sure that the increasing number of hotshot calls, as we've almost tripled the number of calls for service for that team, would supplement for that work.
Okay, so, but we don't have a cost for that. So basically, this cost will remain the same. We're just moving them to a different area.
That's correct. But also, Eric has reminded me that they would also manage the contract with this company.
They would what? I'm sorry?
They would keep track of the contract itself, this outsourced contract, to make sure that all the miles were truly swept as they should be.
Okay, so we would, our staff, then the existing staff, would go out and verify that the company that we're contracting actually did the work that we hired them to do.
That would be inspection of that.
Okay. Okay, I'll let some other council members ask some questions while I digest. Thank you.
Council have any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mayor. So, Andrew, can I borrow you again? I think just to follow up on that thought, if we go to contract, we're not going to lay an employee off. But if we were to add the second sweeper, we would have to add an employee in order to be able to run both of those full time. Correct?
That's true. Right now, we mostly sweep our arterial roads quarterly. We do not have a residential program unless that is called for service. Then we do provide that service, but it's really an ad hoc service. So what we'd like to be able to do is have the ability to do the streets that we have well, and then we're in the investigation stage of what is it that we really can do to meet our stormwater requirements under our current MS4 permit.
Under the general permit.
That's correct.
So right now, I guess what would not be written in the write-up discoverable would be at least an addition of a full-time or half-time employee.
It would be a full-time.
Okay. And I guess that kind of follows up with my question. I don't think it was as clear in the write-up as maybe we had hoped to be. I couldn't see if this was a Band-Aid until we find a better solution with two sweepers temporarily, or are we representing this as our permanent solution to contract this out? And we believe, and if that is, that we believe that to be a long-term savings or a better plan for us economically.
Councilman, I think the plan right now, and speaking with Andre and Eric on this before, is we would like to, and this would be for a 1 year with the options to renew. I think this plan right now is to see how this goes and then make our plan. So this is to get us by at least for the year and make our plan, figure out where we're going now that we're working on budget. I know that the cost to run these sweepers, not so much to get them initially, but that maintenance starting around the 7-year mark is be a kicker later. But I think right now the plan is to do this for a year and see how it goes. And if we want to, come back to you for a renewal, come back to you and then reevaluate it then.
Okay, I think I did share some concerns about whether this was a permanent solution. I like that plan. I like the idea of just seeing how well it goes, how well the consultant works, give us some opportunity to continue the service without having to spend a big dollar, the larger dollar to repair and buy a new one to keep up with our general permit. So for that reason, I'll support it. But I think I think I would share some of the concerns some of the other council members have. Is just let's look and see after that year, if it's awarded, the cost benefit analysis of continuing this contract versus the additional employee and the two new sweepers plus the associated maintenance per year, just to make sure that we have a savings for this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things have already been covered on here, but Andrea, I guess on ours, you got 223 miles of street that you do. What is that, a quarterly type thing, or?
Yes, this is quarterly.
Okay, and none residential unless someone calls in on a residential side. I can see where it needs to be done because most of them this time of year, the inlets are getting full of leaves and trash and stuff like that. And I know we got, one Vector truck that we can get out and do that. My concern is on this, it looks like, from what you said, there's going to be 2 trucks out doing this, and eventually maybe be able to get into the local streets within the subdivisions and what have you to be able to do that. The other thing is that looking at privatizing, I think it's a good deal to do it, but I believe you said that the individual that would be a part of this, or whoever it is, would be actually overseeing those contracts to make sure we got the right mileage and locations and things like that done. So there's an area for them to move into. I know that when we privatize the mowing stuff that we do, and it's almost, well, it's right at $1 million a year. We absorb those people in other areas, I'm assuming. But so it just seems like anytime we privatize anything, we never lose anything on staff to cut maybe some of the cost. That doesn't happen. We just reassign them to somewhere else. And I'm hoping that those reassignments are people that are trained or able to do that type of work, whatever it is that they go into. The other thing that I had some concern, it says that in the future, it would go into the utility side. And I know that we talked about that, to putting one together. And I think it was $5 or $7.50 a month, whatever, to go to the taxpayers that they would pay, just like the road fee for the county.
Mhm.
And I was just noticing that, and that hadn't been approved yet. So this is cash out of pocket that we're doing for this contract.
This was part of last year's budget accommodation for this. The answer was that a capital expenditure for a street sweeper was much too high, that we could not afford that at that time. So a contract would be put in place to cover for the work that needed to be done to meet our permit, but also that we would consider what could happen in the future. Do we grow the program or rebid it or look for another solution to meet our needs?
Okay. That wouldn't happen to be a Timco sweeper, would it? They stay down the biggest part of the time.
Sir, it is a Timco, but we remain brand agnostic.
Okay, all right. That was a concern that I had, and then one of the following statements at the bottom is to the future to move that into this utility fee that would be put back on the taxpayers, and I thought that's really a little bit too premature to, that hadn't come in front of the council to approve anything like that.
I think the intent there was to understand that there was potentially, if passed, there could be a future funding source for certain activities, this being one of many, but we did not want to not remain silent to that because it was part of the public discourse.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a comment, Mayor. The material mentions that sweeping is part of the permit from the TCQ MS4. Is that a statutory requirement that we sweep our streets 4 times a year?
It's part of, I think, a federal actually permit, MPS, right? Andre, just go ahead.
And if our
City Man-
sweeper was down 55% of the time, were there any implications of not meeting the permit requirements?
Councilmember, the aspect is with the Texas has been, the multi-sector general permit associated with the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System is what we fall under for our MS4, and part of our best management practices is street sweeping and keeping that there, and those are goals that we have set aside that we have to report on annually. There's no slap on the hand, but with regards to meeting those goals, it is important that we show that we're making effort and that we're also doing everything we can to meet those best management practices.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? I think it's kind of interesting that when we went to Sugar Land to kind of see if we can work out some kind of a street sweeping agreement, the contractor they're using is from Pearland. And you look at the amount of dollars it would take to keep the one poor crippled street sweeper that we have working, and I go out and buy a brand new one. I think that's a pretty good price for a 1, 2, 3, 4 year service. We've got a lot of roads that need to be swept, and I think the sweeping is a very important process that we're going through. Council, have any further question or comment at this item? Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Aye. Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda to item number 7, matters removed from consent agenda. We just finished 4 of those. Moving to item number 8, new business. Councilmember Reed, would you present
Thank you, Mayor.
Number one.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Consideration possible action, resolution number R 2019-104. So moved.
We have a motion second on the floor. Staff report.
Thanks, Mayor. Would you like to hear from anybody comments? You want me to? Oh, I'm sorry.
Those comments are for item 2.
Thank you.
Mayor.
This is a contract award for construction services. City has a lift station. It's about going on 30 years old, so it's served its purpose, serving a lot of the Shady Crest area. So it's more than time to rebuild that, modernize it, put out bids, and recommending the best interest bidder for the city, Rodeco. They've got a good track record for the city. They are the second lowest, as price read, but the time provided to construct and the increment, we believe, is in the best interest of the city, and so recommending it as outlined in the agenda item there.
Council, any question or comment on it? Everybody's jumping for it. Mr. Secretary, I guess we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Little, Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda, new business item number 2. Ask staff to pick this up.
This is just trying to get some city council discussion. We need a policy at some point that would formalize and guide for how the city wants to approach. From time to time, we'll get requests from property owners outside of the city limits that want to connect to our water and sewer system. There are going to be cases we find historically where that has been done. It's not the best practice for many reasons, and particularly now with the new annexation laws, that's really the leverage point for the city to have these properties come in formally into the city and do that in a thoughtful, organized way. There's going to be cases where they can't connect right away, where the time is not here for contiguity. But there's a lot of implications from that. So Mr. Coker first wanted to lay out some of the points that council should consider in a policy, and then Trent's going to amplify some operational kinds of things and then ask for the council's feedback. So Darren and then Trent, please.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Just following up on Mr. Pearson's comments there, as you saw from the AR, there are approximately 50 properties that are being served outside of the city. Then we have approximately 37,000 accounts, and 50 of those are in the ETJ. And those would be pretty much serviced in the area of the Lawhon Elementary, Brookside. You've got some over in the Rustic Oak Elementary area, Dixie Farm Road in Harris County, and then also by the Tom Bass Park. As you'll see, it's reflected in the AR, but also Mud 16 is an area of the ETJ that receives city services as well, but that's through a strategic partnership agreement and development agreement there with that particular developer. So those are the areas that are currently being served in the ETJ. But as the city continues to do other developments, and an example would be the Massey Oaks development, and that development itself is going to it's going to be in the city limits, but in order to get the utilities to that area, it's going to have to go through the ETJ. So it's likely we may get more requests for services as our utility lines are extended in the ETJ, and so which sort of emphasizes the need for the council to give us some feedback or provide staff some feedback on developing a policy and how to deal with these circumstances in the future. Specifically, tonight, one of the discussion topics will be one request that's included in your packet, and that'll be regarding on a request in the Amy Lane area, which is going to be located to the south of Bailey Road and along, what is that? south of Bailey, and just, I guess, west of, what's the other road? Or is it Harkey, or, just want to make sure I don't misstate, McLean Road, so just west of McLean Road. And that request, we'll be talking about that as we get further into this as well. But I think right now it'd be proper to just go ahead and start talking a little bit about, again, the purpose of the discussion is to receive input on formalizing a policy regarding utility service requests outside the city limits. And as indicated in the write-up, currently the policy is to deny those requests for utility service for properties that aren't located in the city, and unless they request to be annexed into the city, and then, of course, subsequently annexed. There are three considerations that we were going to present to council tonight. One would be annexation / legal type considerations. We'll talk about some code enforcement related issues, as well as the operational aspects that would have implications as well on whether or not the council would want to continue to provide services to areas outside the city limits. From the annexation perspective, I think it's well documented, and the council's pretty familiar with the fact that the annexation laws changed in 2017, which definitely impacted our ability as a city to annex properties. And as such, one of the primary tools we have to annex, one of the only tools we have to annex properties is if it's done by petition of the property owner. And there's a concern that if you provide water and sewer services to people in the ETJ, and they are receiving those services, it takes away any incentive for them to ever petition the city for annexation. And one of the things we'll talk about later is that one of the petitions that we currently have on that have been presented to the city. In that instance, it's not contiguous to the city, and the law still requires that any annexations we do, they have to be adjacent and contiguous to our current city limit line. So it doesn't allow us to go out and annex an island in the ETJ. There was some thought that that was actually allowed under the new law, but after receiving further clarification from General Counsel at TML, they believe that there's a separate provision that actually prohibits discontinuous annexations. And that had been represented to the party that's made application that would be a possibility, but in fact it is not. So that's one issue. Another issue would be that each property, if you're going to serve properties in the ETJ, the only way it can really be done is through a development agreement. And those development agreements, in doing a development agreement, some of the things that would need to be included in that would be recovery of impact fees, and of course the city would have the ability to collect impact fees. But whether, right now, as you know, in the city limits, we only collect 50%, but the city would actually, through a development agreement, would have ability to collect 100% of the impact fee if it opted to do so through the development agreement. Would have to cover maintenance costs through a development agreement to make sure that the system is maintained, and then also would include any other property development issues that would be appropriate to include in a development agreement. One of the concerns, though, is that if you provide service in the ETJ, is how do you ensure that those properties then at some point in time, when they're eligible, let's say they're not contiguous to the city, but when they're eligible for annexation, how do you ensure that they would actually petition the city to be annexed? And that's actually a question that we don't fully know the answer to today. And it's been suggested that we could possibly do it through deed restrictions, and say that had a property owner puts a deed restriction on the property, saying that when that property would be eligible for annexation in the future, that it would apply to whoever owns the property at that time in the future. Whether or not such a development, something like that, would be enforceable is really questionable. To simply to argue that a future property owner, second, third, fourth generation property owner down the line, then all of a sudden really had through no petition to the city could be annexed, and that we would argue that a petition was really essentially the deed restrictions would constitute a petition, and that's really questionable on whether or not that would even be enforceable. Question then would be, can they agree to do it by development agreement and have that development agreement be applicable to the successors and assigns of the property and have that recorded in the deed records? And again, the enforceability of that would be called into question as well. And the reason I say that is currently we can do development agreements for properties that are subject to annexation, because the development agreements like we did on Bailey Road, for the ag exempt properties, And those do apply to future property owners. But the reasons they do is because that was in lieu of annexation. We had the ability at that time to do a unilateral annexation, and then that agreement was in lieu of, and it was actually an agreement that was contemplated and permitted through statutory law. To do so through a development agreement when we don't have the ability to annex a property unilaterally, whether or not that would be enforceable, again, would be another issue. So from an annexation perspective, these are some legal considerations that I would just make council aware of. One, whether or not we're impacting the incentive of property owners to ever petition the city. A second, any development agreements, the factors that we would want to consider in a development agreement, everything from maintenance to impact fees, and then in addition, the enforceability of any provisions that it be applicable to any future property owners for annexation purposes. So next would be code enforcement considerations. Something else to consider is that right now our city ordinances that apply to utility users are only applicable in the city limits. They don't apply in the ETJ. So we have current enforcement authority through our municipal court for users of our utility system. If they're violating any of our ordinances, we have that through illegal connections or whatever that may be. We have an ability to enforce that through our municipal court. If it's in the ETJ, we do not have the ability to do that. Consequently, any enforcement for any violations for users in the ETJ would have to be done through a development agreement. And in order to enforce a development agreement, it would essentially be through civil enforcement through a breach of contract. If they're violating any terms of the development agreement, we could enforce that through court. So it would create some challenges, at least assuming that we had to seek enforcement in the ETJ. Those would be the challenges associated with that from a code enforcement perspective. With that being said, I'll pass that back off to Trent and to address any operational considerations.
Thank you, Darren. So just a couple more things for consideration is that we're implementing our AMI communication network to work with the new meters that are going to start being installed at the end of this month. And we've got to have a proliferation of coverage of the areas where we've got meters. And as new meters, if we add new meters in parts of the ETJ not covered by that system, then we would either have to expand that system to be able to communication network to be able to read those meters through the AMI system, or we would have to continue with the current utilizing meter technicians to do the drive-by type readings out in the ETJ. So just some consideration of how that would work with our new AMI system that would be different than we would be operating with the existing meters within the city. So some of this was discussed earlier, but I think what's kind of risen to where we need the formal policy at this point is we have had multiple requests recently for service out in the ETJ or outside of the city. And as we have been for 4+ years, we've been basically denying those requests and that we don't provide service outside the city, any new services outside the city. And then, of course, as was mentioned with the upcoming Massey Oaks project, that's going to build significant water and wastewater infrastructure through the ETJ. And we just foresee that as that gets built and as folks know that infrastructure is there, we're going to see additional requests to tie onto the infrastructure. So to formalize the policy, it makes a lot of sense for us to do that at this point. So as was in your package, the recommendation is to basically confirm the current practice of not providing utility services to properties currently outside the city limits until they are annexed into the city. So with that, we would be happy to answer any questions and get your feedback on a policy.
You know, this was a situation that had been available over the years in the Pearland area. We did provide some of that service outside of citizens that were outside of our city limits. And we did that with the anticipation that we would be annexing them. And we even built the water lines right up to the area where that still the city limits, but right next to the big area that was to be we were providing that service for, with the anticipation that at some point they would be annexed into the city. And we've got a big, strong negative on continuing that. And we do have a legal way of doing that, sort of like the Matilda University. The districts that we have, like in Silver Lake, that the one of them where we agreed on that with a contract that we, at a certain time, we could go in and annex the city and make it part of, because we have spent an awful lot of money today for peripheral areas of Pearland to build the roads out to a certain point and stop. We built it because we built water lines and sewer lines up to a point that would serve that area very well. And then the response was, we don't want to play with you. So that I think I would not be enthusiastic about wanting to continue that process. Now, there are some very quality candidates that don't fit into that, and we've got to figure out somehow they could do that. But they must be, if we do that, they ought to be contiguous to the city limits in some way. It means that somebody maybe a couple of blocks away may have to buy some property to make it contiguous or something. But I think it's something that we can't extend it, although I would very dearly love to do in a couple of cases on a personal basis, but we would not be able to because we are in a position, if we did that, we would then have almost a legal obligation against us to go ahead and provide it in other areas. So I don't see an easy way around to change that process at this point. Although I would love to in probably a couple of instances. I'm sorry.
No problem there. I'd like to take a moment for the record. The petitioners on this, for this particular issue, the ones that have come to speak and will be somewhat of the focus in the conversation, are individuals that I've consulted for in the past as an engineering consultant, not as a council member. I've kind of guided them in a direction that ultimately led to this, somewhat unpredictably. For that reason, I think it's best if I recuse myself from any of the conversation. While I've taken no money for the consulting thus far, I think it's cleaner for the citizens to know that I'm not working on both sides of this issue. So I do want to participate in the overall discussion, the policy throughout our ETJ, but I do not want to participate in anything associated with this particular project. I'll just sit and listen.
Good, thank you. Any comment from council? Carbone, did you have at this point?
I think we have some citizen comments.
Okay.
Mayor, we have two citizens that would like to speak on this issue, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
The first citizen is Mr. Alan Mueller. Thank you for being here tonight, Ms. Mueller. If you could just give your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Sir.
Let you know when you have about a minute left.
All right. Good evening, Alan Mueller with 4201 Broadway here this evening, representing Menon Enclave. I'll start speaking correctly here in a moment. So, just wanted to make a few comments, again, in particular about this one particular topic, not the policy in general. But looking back through the agenda packet, it was really kind of surprising to see my name back in there since 2002. So I guess if you stick around long enough, things do come full circle. So I'm back again. And again, wanted to be real clear in terms of listening to the items from the staff report and the policy. We're not here to try to influence the policy as a whole. That's not why we're here. But in this particular case, we just want to look at this one particular situation. They had started down this path some time ago, trying to get this started when the understanding of the law was that the property could be annexed, and we had actually submitted a petition to be annexed. We had gotten the schedule from the city for what the hearings were going to be. We had submitted a zoning application, so we were starting that process. And then the law was reread and discovered that we were not eligible for that. And so Dr. Menon is kind of stuck in this, conundrum that he can't move forward. He's willing to move, forward with the annexation, but just could not. And so, again, I guess if you go back to some of those letters from 2002, I mean, even then we were recognizing that the temple that's there and the people, the volunteers that support it, really are an asset to the community. It's really a very unique situation. And that's really what Menon Enclave is all about, is supporting the temple that's there. And so I guess the main point we wanted to make this evening is just that we understand that policies have to be written, and they're going to cover the vast majority of any situation that you're going to run into. But with any policy, there's going to be exceptions that just don't fit the policy. And so that's what we're asking for in this particular case, because we were so far down the path to getting there before the understanding of the law was changed. And so the proposal that's outlined on the March 15th letter that's in your packet, we're willing to convert all of those to a development agreement. Understand that there are certainly some challenges with that. But in this particular case also, we're only talking about sewer service and not water service. So some of the concerns in terms of the water supply and code enforcement and metering are not going to be applicable to this particular situation, since we're just talking about sanitary sewer.
You got about 30 seconds.
And I will wrap up right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, next on our list is Mr. Menon. Dr. Menon. And if you wouldn't mind giving your name and address.
My name is Gopal Menon, 6962 Amy Lane, Pearland, Texas 77584. Good evening, all of you, respect Mayor, Councilman, or all the other members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Mr. Miller already mentioned the details, technical details, and our requirements. I've been connected with the temple from its inception, 42 years connected to the Pearland city. I've been living there for 13 years. We've been trying to develop that piece of property, about 3 acres, to accommodate some requests of people who are connected to the temple, could be of service to the temple if they live adjacent, especially at old age, and some women can walk to the temple. We have a gate connecting the temple. So I very much understand all the explanations and the requirements, and I will very much abide by whatever is decided. But the request is to consider a provision accommodating inclusion of that to be, or sewer line to be tapped into the already existing temple line, which is connected to the city. That's a request. Hopefully we'll get a positive answer. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Menon. I'm sorry. Mayor, that's the comments for tonight. Have anybody else that would like to speak? Okay.
Councilman Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just to lead off, so I guess when I think through water and sewer, I think of it as the enterprise funds, and it's a business. And I guess question for staff, how have we modeled out the size for our water and wastewater treatment plants? Up till recently, I think we've always included ETJ expansion. Is that correct?
The eventual points of service, yes, but not individual lines. Those are developer driven to access those. So,
Okay.
but you're right. The last point too is, as you saw with, I can't remember what the other plan, maybe the impact fee plan. We've dialed that back and recognizing that there's no guarantee or assumption of those coming into the city.
I guess I look at it as we're more than likely going to have both the water and the wastewater capacity at the plants, and with the new surface water treatment plant coming on. And if we can get 100% of the impact fee, that's more revenue to the enterprise fund. And then I believe we charge, 150% of current in-city rates for water and sewer. Is that correct?
In the case where we do have it, I believe that is, and we'd want to, I think that's part of what we want to formalize in a policy to make that more strict, I guess.
Yeah, so I look at it as if we can get a development agreement that covers the maintenance costs, keeps the city whole, and there's no additional fees to tie into the lines, the applicant would take care of all that. We're able to recover 100% of the impact fee, and we're able to get 150% revenue. Looking at it from a business, the enterprise fund standpoint, I think this is a way that I don't think it's going to move the needle that much, but you could argue that this could actually lower the rates for the folks in the city for water and sewer. So I understand the points about the AMI, and I guess we'll see how that coverage works as it rolls out. I do see that as an issue. To the specific case that was discussed tonight, since it is sewer, I don't know that AMI interface matters on that side. But yeah, those are my thoughts leading it off.
All right.
I don't have any comments right now, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was kind of looking for, you had mentioned earlier about the incentive that's tied to providing these services. And to Councilmember Carbone's point, the higher rate, I feel, would also serve as somewhat of an incentive as well, to hopefully bring people to put forth a petition for annexation in the future. But the part that I'm trying to wrap my brain around is obviously, if this is a particular issue that we're looking at on one hand, and then kind of a general broad way of doing business on the other hand, we can't just look at this one instance, but rather the whole picture. If we've got a development that is separated by a huge area of land, I could see where this could be a problem. So I guess one of the questions I had is, could a development agreement include some of these other things that you listed in here, like the communication issues with the AMI meter systems? Can these things be built into the development agreements, and where the developers themselves can take on some of these additional costs if there is a long, linear separation from what's existing, to tie them into a system, including things like the communication systems and things like that? Can those be used as incentives as well, to maybe offer a future rebate or something like that?
I think we could calculate some of those costs for a single lot or small development. I think they'd be pretty cost prohibitive. And then I'm not sure how we would formulate some sort of buyback on that if they were ever annexed.
Okay. And then I guess to the other point, and these development agreements, and I know it said some stuff in here about this particular development that we have in here, talking about creating an HOA to help recover some fees to make it a little bit easier, as well as keeping the annexation petition on file. But those, is my understanding, can be changed at any point, though, correct? I mean, it's not something that is...
Well, first of all, those were some suggestions, I think, made by the applicant, just trying to put something out on the table.
Right.
Because I think there are some obstacles with respect to the HOA. I mean, creating an HOA, for instance, for the maintenance of the lift station, that's fine. But as far as the individual properties, our ordinance and even some CCNA regulations would probably not allow us to have one account through the HOA, because then they would be reselling the service to the 9 individual property owners. So we're going to end up having to have 9 individual accounts. And so, if the direction is to go through a development agreement with the applicant this evening, we can work through and figure out what's allowable and what's not allowable, and different ways to approach that. I think that was just tossed out there as a way of trying to get a discussion of some potential options.
Okay. I guess the only thing I'm left kind of trying to figure out is, if it is a discontiguous piece of property and it is just separated by a huge area, I just don't really know how to address that. So that's the only thing. So I guess for the most part, I would agree with what staff's recommendation is to this point.
I guess kind of clarify that, so you agree that we don't want to provide anything?
Well, because I agree, because it just seems like it would be very difficult if there was a property that was separated, like I said, by a huge area that just never wanted to be annexed. And
For the AMI?
for the whole thing, yeah. I mean, running, looking through here and thinking about the easements and all that kind of stuff, it just seems like it would be frustrating. But again, I'm still trying to think it through.
I mean, this is going to be a scenario like down Harkey, where we're gonna have a sewer line and a water line running right in front of somebody's house, and say, no, you can't tap into it. That to me doesn't make sense. If we say, hey, yeah, you can tap into it, you pay all the fees, you pay the impact fees, you pay the tap fees, and by the way, we're going to charge you 150% because you're not in the city.
Right.
That seems to make sense. And in terms of AMI, if the policy is that they have to make sure they connect to the AMI real quick, that's going to be cost prohibitive, and they're not going to go down that route. So I think that solves the AMI side. If you want to buy water, then you've got to make sure that your meter, you've got to put the infrastructure in, and so they won't be able to afford that, and it won't make sense. But yet, where it is kind of the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, it's easy revenue for us that comes into the enterprise fund.
But, okay, so I guess the way I was thinking about it is if, I guess from a legal perspective, that seems like almost an exception to me. I'm not sure. But I guess if there's something right in front of me versus me being really far away from it, I don't want to, if I'm thinking about that landowner who's really far and I see that somebody can pay a lower fee to tap into the city's services because they're closer, it just would frustrate me a lot. And I just feel like it would cause a lot of legal concern, but I don't know, maybe it wouldn't.
Can I get some clarification, at least on one issue? If there is an applicant wanting to tie onto the city system and they are adjacent to the city's city limits, would the council want those properties then to petition if they are already adjacent?
I would be for that.
I wanted to, that would help provide some initial direction, because obviously the one that we're specifically talking about this evening, that's not the case, but there could be some where they come forward and say, hey, I want to tie on, and yeah, they're adjacent. Then I think would the default policy for those that are adjacent and contiguous to the city limits would be for them then petition the city for annexation if you would like the service?
I would agree with that, yes.
I mean, that's been the current practice, and I agree with it.
Okay.
Well, I've heard a lot of reasons not to do this, and so it's pretty clear, I think, what the city's position is. But I like Councilman Carbone's approach in looking at it as a business, and unless the additional revenue would be offset by the legal cost and the additional administrative burden of setting up these DAs, and the people who are already adjacent to the city and got the water and sewer lines running near their property, I think we should consider allowing those people to tap in. So I'm kind of on the fence on this one.
Yeah. This particular area has, especially with the temple, has been very important for the entire city of Pearland, to be quite honest with you. Through there, they're good residents and people from all over the Houston area and Texas come, but also from across the United States. They come into the Houston area and it's my understanding that the temple is probably about the second or third largest temple in the United States. There, we've heard all the things why we couldn't do it. But I think it's incumbent on us as council members, and also with the legal side of it and with the Trent. I'm sure there's some way that we should be able to address something to make this work, to be quite honest. I mean, I've heard all the discussions on why it won't, but I've not heard any of the discussions of, okay, well, this is a possibility that we could do it like this or what have you. And I know that with the staff and the legal that we're fully capable of looking outside the box, if you want to call it. I hate to use that dang statement. But anyway, looking at other opportunities that we should do, and I think in Tony's consideration too, and also with Councilman Little, I think it's also a business activity too. I don't know how much it would cost us. I don't know how many people we'd have to hire to run a sewer line. But I know years ago we ran one off of 288 or off of Broadway all the way down to Silver Lake to hook up to I think it's Bobby Steedner's Animal Hospital Clinic, and it cost him $80,000, but it took it on down past that at a point. We made with that we made it happen through the council members on it. So I would say that let's take a look at this and not turn it down or anything right now and just say we can't do it. I think it's incumbent upon us to look at it, and especially with the staff to do that and bring it back to council, is to look at it as an opportunity to do something, and for something that's been so strong for the city of Pearland, and also bringing in a lot of business with the city of Pearland from all over the United States. So I think if collectively, if the staff and legal put their head together, I think you could find a way to look at this and do it. But I'm also hoping that we can bring it back with some kind of a light to be able to do something.
One of the things that could probably be factored in is the proximity to our legal boundary. You wouldn't want somebody a half mile away under any kind of agreement. But there may be areas where there could be, I know that a piece of property that is not contiguous to the city of boundary could have problems doing their various legal improvements and utilities, because you may have to go through somebody else's property. You have to buy some right of way. You have to go through and do some things of that type. But there may be some areas where a large area that would be a future area that would be willing and would like to become a part of Pearland by annexation perhaps, but they're not contiguous to our boundary, which is a requirement. And if there was some kind of an agreement or some way for that to appear, but not one that would be several miles away or several half miles away, because you'd be putting lines in that has to go through somebody's property to get to some of the areas. But there may be some wiggle room in there, maybe something of that type. And I know several pieces of property that would be a good candidate for that. And but I don't know that they're too far away from the boundaries of Pearland. And when you put a piece of property in, if you get the right of way and get all in place, you still have it will pass in some cases other houses that do not have that benefit. And how do you solve that problem of if it's a line going through, that's an exception to our rule. We're going to pick up all of the other people along the line, and it's something as we go through this process, there may be some way that we could make it profitable, but not a universal where people just don't want to be in the city, but they want all the water, sewer, like we had before.
Yeah. Well, Mayor, we had the mud districts that was capped at 750 acres total on that. But we found out, and the reason we did that is because we didn't want any more mud districts inside the city of Pearland or outside the city of Pearland. But then what we're able to come back and do, make them non-contiguous, and you could go out beyond. That's why you have mud districts that would be here locally, but 10 miles away, there would be part of the mud district there under the same mud district. And so we found a way to work with that, and I'm sure we can find a way to work with this.
I think maybe that was part of where I got a little confusing. I think in Mr. Menon's case, it makes sense, but I don't want that to necessarily pertain to the larger, broader application of this, and that's where it's kind of getting a little muddy for me. Again, it makes sense here, looking at it, but if I'm half a mile away in some other area where, again, you've got to cross over people's, whether or not it's feasible or not, I would see that and say, well, why did they get it? And then, I just feel like it would cause more problems.
Well,
Right. I was going to say, I'm sorry, Mayor, go ahead. I apologize. I was going to say, what I'm hearing right now is, at least from several council members, is that with respect to the specific application that's been made for service on Amy Lane, that right now that I'm hearing that you would like staff to work with them to try to make that work. With respect to the broader policy issue, that the council's okay with the city's current practice. If the property is adjacent and contiguous to the city, then you want to make those properties still come in and petition because they are eligible for annexation. Then with respect to properties that are not contiguous, but where utilities are out there that they could possibly tie onto, that you would like to see that be a possibility through a policy, provided the things that we discussed, 100% impact fee, 150% of the rate, maintenance costs are covered, any infrastructure costs, all those things are covered so that there's no negative impact to the enterprise fund. And in fact, it would be a plus to the enterprise fund, that's okay. Then the next part of the discussion I heard was whether or not we wanted to establish some type of limit to where we would consider how far out we go there. And obviously, you'd want to avoid any type of arbitrary determination of that. And ultimately, when you think about it down the line, is if you allow properties that aren't contiguous to become part of the system under these conditions, then obviously, as property, if the city limits creeps to that property to where it is adjacent, there's a good chance you would at least think that they would want to be part of the city at that point because of the rates that they're paying for water service. Maybe not. I don't know, but that's maybe not a safe assumption. But at least that's sort of a recap of what I've heard so far. Is that consistent with the council's understanding?
It is with mine, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that we'd like to be able to have a policy where we could do something like that, but reward those people who were not very interested in playing before or being in the city. So I think it's something we've had to work up some kind of a process. And I think that may be a doable process there. Any further comments for council? Does staff have any wrap-up on comments on this?
We'll try to draft up something that would be applicable to this and bring it back to y'all for consideration. So,
yeah. Do your magic.
Sorry?
Do your magic.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, sir.
Moving in our agenda, unless the council has any further comment at this point. In our agenda to item number 9, Mayor Council issues for the City Council discussion. There were none requested. An executive session under Texas Government Code Section 551.074 for personnel matters regarding the appointments to some of the boards and commissions that are requiring completing their staffing request. So at this point, I will move into executive session at, my clock said it's 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock. Return from executive session at 8:20. If we can go business to conduct as a result of the council nomination executive session. And we are to move to adjourn at 8:40. At 8:25, excuse me.